Hey, hello, Miss Ja. Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I'm back to say hello. I'm looking at my phone here because I wrote more poems and things on it. But yeah, in quarantine, we all have a lot of time, and I've been spending that time trying to get in touch with my own, history and my background and my upbringing, and sort of diving into the traumas I faced and different parenting that I experienced. So today is about my dad. Fun stuff for everybody. I know a lot of us have daddy issues and just, ways that we were raised by the men who came before us. And some of which was great, some of which was not as good. Um, and we're especially learning that now, as mental health comes in the conversation and we learn how to speak with people better, and how to, show love, and be free with love and affection in the way that a lot of our fathers and mothers were not raised to do so. I feel really lucky to be part of this generation that's changing how they parent and raise their kids and how they speak to their kids. So I love my dad. I'm lucky that he's still in my life. Some people don't have that, or some people just don't feel safe around their dads. So I have that, but I think that it's always okay to maybe not criticize, but to analyze somebody and to share your feelings with them about what certain things have hurt you in your upbringing. So this is from my dad, and it's called A Song for Dad, this title, because I've always liked that song by Donny Hathaway, A Song for You, I'm sorry. Singing the song to you. Do y'all know that one? I've probably way off key, but that's okay. I've been so many places in my life and time. I've sung a lot of songs and sang some bad rhymes. Figured out my life in stages. Whoops, there we're getting it. 10,000 people watching, and we were alone. And I'm singing the song to you. We were alone, and I'm singing the song to you. So now that little ADD song moment's out of my system, we'll get into the poem that's also for my dad. And it's just called Dad. Dad Part 1. Here we go. Oh, and links in the description below for mental health resources, for domestic violence and abuse resources, lines that you can text and you can call. When we explore these feelings, they can be very painful. Dealing with mental health, dealing with abuse is painful in general. So just know that people are there for you, there to listen to you. I am, and so are the people in the resources I'm going to give to you. So here we go. Dad Part 1. I thought I had forgotten it all. Some of the earliest memories of my dad that I can see are so sad to me, like gray bones littered in a graveyard of good. Golden leaves cover up all the rot. One such uneasy nightmare came rushing back to me one night, feverish like a dream, but just as much too real. The anxiety I tend to get feels like drowning. Feels like 4 years old, standing next to my father's tall, endless legs, him reciting to me a math problem, another lesson for today, after breakfast. While standing in between my father and our large green kitchen table, I vaguely listened and let my eyes drift downwards. I saw 2 pencils and lined paper masquerading there as placemats. My father's example goes on. My tiny brain wanders. At some point, I interrupt his soliloquy with a question. I have long jumped off his train of thought and was thinking I should catch back up now. God, what was the topic again? What was the number, Dad? See, in our house, we used to have a number for each morning we studied together. Dad would base the whole lesson around it, some single-digit number that was randomized each day, seemingly to me. I could never hold on to the thing, though. My memory was always off. I was a bouncy kid, but today they might call that something different. No matter, though, in this story, my mother and my father always took turns instructing me every single day. Books and flashcards, paper and pens, stories and music. Dad's lessons were notably tougher. The year before kindergarten was all kind of a blur. School begets school and more school, and that was the deal, the price I pay. My contract for my room and all the possessions I owned, contingent on study and practice, discipline and respect for the elder. Making something of myself. My toys, my books, my room, all on loan from my mother and my father. They knew that notion was clear. Earn your keep. We learned how to add with that number of the day, how to subtract with it, and maybe division could have been coming had the public city school not been starting up again in the fall. Now this was all I knew, this constant tete-a-tete, but for now I am just 4. Kindergarten is next year. I am told this will help me get there. I followed along like a good little girl, but again the mind does wander. I am small, and my father's brain is bigger, and I don't know what to do or say that's right. What was that number again? Daddy? I had forgotten it. Worse, I had asked him about it unthinkingly. An intrusion on his tangent. My first teacher. My dad. My father's face looked so much like my face. The same cheeks, the same smile. But then he looked down at me and frowned. That looked like my face too. He is losing concentration, a faint exasperation. I had interrupted him. A cardinal sin. Ambria, he says, I'm not going to tell you. His voice is loud and deep. I do not fuss. That makes sense, I suppose to myself. After all, he has just said it. The number. I know he did. The answer is out there in space somewhere. I had failed to hold on to it, a ball he had tossed me that I couldn't quite keep the grip on, in and out of the glove. I knew the loss was coming before it had even happened. I saw it slide through my fingers, out onto the floor, rolling across the linoleum as it had rolled right out of my useless head. Oh no, here it comes. Dad said nothing more to me about the number, just was still and stood there silently. The mood in the air was hard to place, more expectant than anything else, exuding a need for respect. I looked down and away. I knew his stoic demeanor was my most obvious clue about his ever unfailing patience. We would wait as long as we needed to for me to fall in line and follow. A peek into his psyche or his dominance. He could always outlast me. My dad. With no indication in his face or voice, I guessed the number for him. 4? I supply. No, Ambria. My wild guess had failed me. I began a small, slow spiral. I am wounded by the 2-word reply. Never enough and not as tough as anyone could need from me. I am weak. So then I stare at the lined paper below me, counting up the punched holes, one by one, to pull some sort of idea from the thinnest of all the air. Praying for divine intervention, I guess. The answer to his riddle exists. I know it. I can find it. I'm smart enough. What is that magic number? I looked to the lined whole paper again for some sort of sign. 6, Dad? Yes, he says, answering after my little heart has skipped a beat, and I wondered if I would have to guess yet again. Risk disappointing him again. I always tried to limit how many times I did that. Looking back, I am not sure if he said yes due to some sort of pity, or if I had actually managed to give the right answer at the right particular time. What I do remember is that there was no follow-up after that. The speech was over once I gave a single right answer, and he gave a nod to the affirmative. I hate to even say it. I wanted so much more, but I kept my mouth closed in his presence. You don't talk back. This is how I learned to speak to grown-ups. I sat down at the desk, just as he gestured me to. My tiny legs are kicking. The new lesson begins again. Addition this time, and different numbers jump up from the page and get to dance. They all waltz together after a while. A yellow sun is streaming into the kitchen through our long white blinds, but I can't quite see it yet. My eyes are on the shadows. My eyes are on the numbers, and all I see is shadows. Sometimes it all feels like drowning, that familiar feeling I dread when I don't understand something at school or at home, and he refuses to throw me a life jacket. I am treading water, and just as my head goes beneath the surface, he is there, telling me to kick harder. He is floating beside me, watching and smiling with no teeth. Swimming always came easier to him. My dad taught me how to do it. Everyone was in awe all around him. He submerged himself like a fish. He taught all us kids at some point. Whoever would listen and did it his way, he gladly or dutifully let them follow behind. If he had ever felt a fear of the water, it was long before we all were born, down in the south where the summers are hot, and he learned on the shores where he hailed. From a rural town, trapping food, 8 brothers, my granny, taking care of each other. That was my dad's story, and he is an older man now, a baby boomer, if nothing else. A child of struggle and sacrifice, my dad. I didn't know much of his childhood because he never liked to talk about it. That fact is still in present tense. It had been enshrined that way. But I had always felt that I was some sort of a dream for him, that he never exactly wanted a kid until he had one and tried to adjust, and for that I was grateful. I was the oldest, perhaps an experiment. But he did tell me he loved me, his giant hands outstretched, his flaws and all, so much like mine that I can't explain it. I used to steal giant picture albums from our basement and keep them under my bed. I looked at what few pictures I had of him, my daddy, crinkly with time, him as a boy, so much younger then, but with the same large eyes, looking back at me as I tried to understand. And now I can't stop dreaming. We are in the ocean together, Dad and I, or perhaps in a pool that he brought us to. I am 7 or 8 or 9, maybe it's a hotel pool. There are dozens of cousins around. I have to stand out to show him that I can swim. I'd like to say that he threw me in that first time, but I surely jumped of my own accord. I wanted to be just like him, unafraid of deep water. Strong and tough and so much bigger. I wanted to be close to him, to have him proud of me, to feel his hand on my shoulder telling me that I did well, to have his eyes acknowledge it, to feel that smile beaming down like the sun. But first he has to teach me. We are learning swim training now. He has his hands under my back. Learning to float is the first step, but it is also the most terrifying. Face so close to the water, so able to go under, sputter, and drown. My dad is my only barrier, my savior, as I am learning to swim. After a while of practice, this man lets me go in the water, and I was made to believe that my body knew the difference between how to sink and how to float. Well, it did not. So feeling myself suddenly sinking fast, panic overtaking, Dad grabbed me back and told me to stay calm. I understood that whether I did or not was a reflection of me and only me. He had given me the knowledge and I must choose to apply it. Breathe through the panic as you're swimming, on beat with each breaststroke, efficient, quick, pull yourself together. Little girl, learn to stay calm and learn how to swim. Ambria, what little do you know of sharks? Stay above the water. Steer clear of trouble. Don't waste your coach's time. I pretend the bad voices are bubbles and they can't get to me anymore. They either pop as they hit the surface or I blow them all away. My choice, my rules, for once. I could hear my mother's happy tone, cheering me on from the sidelines, breaking through the voices, assuring me that I was the very best part of myself. The part that she only saw. Mom didn't swim, not nearly as well as me or my dad, but she loved us far greater and deeper than that, wide enough that I felt it all the way at my core from her spot over on the bleachers. Her light was enough to make me float alone. My mom always gave my spirit buoyancy. My outsides, though, were all of my father, heavy and unconfident and strange. A stern glance, an impatient huff. But he was always happier in the water. After all, this was supposed to be a fun day. Momentous. His lesson, his time with me, a privilege that I was wasting. It was sunny. A vacation even. If only I could leave my head to see that. So ungrateful, you spoiled brat. I practiced with my father over hours and days as a kid. Swimming all the time. As a teenager, I enrolled in a local lifeguard camp all on my own. I pushed myself that summer. I gave myself over, floundered and fought, swallowed water all the way down. The first endurance test nearly killed me. Then I got stronger. Then more serious. I passed the full exam in the presence of the instructor at the end of that summer. And I was not the only one. At some point, I made friends, or at least we connected on some level for some time as teenagers as we practiced how to live and let die in a pool or a lake or an ocean. How to sacrifice oneself, how to find motivation in the deepest of our caverns. We looked out for each other. But friends were always hard for me to keep. I suppose I was much too intense. I revealed my closeted anger, but never on purpose. Shooting my hand up in school, competing at every game, I marked myself present for a special reason, never wanted to waste my time, anyone's time. Everyone else had their own agenda. School, in some ways, was hell. School, in some ways, was sanctuary. Lifeguard camp was a weird amalgamation of that, and the degree was no less earned. I learned to save him if I could. My fellow man, person in need, not only the one who screams for help, but someone who is quiet. My father himself would suffer a dignified death in the water and let his own daughter go it alone, lest he yell, lest he flail. If we were all waiting for a call for help, we would wait on him forever. Holding our breath would lead to our drowning, and we have only just passed our test. I learned to put my needs on hold because he needed me so. And that felt like honor to me, and I only hoped that he would see it that way. My mother picked me up from that last day of camp. In her minivan, I showed her my tiny ribbon and medal, and she loaded on the praise. It was beautiful, but missing something. Transparent glass on the inside, without my dad there. Back in the master bedroom at home, he sat in a maroon red velvet chair. I walk in and show him my certificate of achievement. Although I can't remember exactly, I believe he smiled big. He gazed at the paper with pride, eyes wide. And now, it has been so many years. Guess I should forget all of that. My body has grown unlike I ever thought it would back in childhood. Sometimes I don't recognize myself. More like my dad each and every day. Is that what it is to grow up? I can never stand to be wrong, and this smacks of him. I strive to always have the right answer to every question, and even to admit my wrongs, but when I don't, I struggle to stay afloat on top of a heavy mountain of hypocrisy. I long to feel praise from anyone, a stranger, a student, or a father in disguise, telling me that they don't see it, or love me despite it, that I am somehow right and good. I fear the appetite of anxiety, of letting it overwhelm me, deepening like the oceans overhead. I hide under the reef and seaweed. 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000 years later, and I've left 1,000 pools behind, but I am still afraid of the anxiety and what it brings. Afraid of even the stillest of water, of how I may disturb her and what I may find disturbing that lies beneath her, beneath and below that big dark blue. But I refuse to let myself drown in it. I haven't forgotten yet. I am my father's daughter, and I fight back against exhaustion. Endurance ongoing, always innovating. I'll save him. I know it. And I will be okay. that was Dad Part 1. Just a tiny little look into my daddy issues that I think a lot of people out there have. So don't ever be afraid to talk about it. The way we were raised has a great, tremendous effect on how we develop as children and who we become as adults. And so it's important to identify those patterns, especially the unhealthy ones, so you can stop them. There was a lot of things I talked about in that poem, but certainly the way I feel so motivated comes from my dad, which is good in theory, right? To be hardworking, but I have a tendency to overdo it because I value endurance a lot, even when I'm running myself into the ground. Yeah, so that's a little part of that. So if you're somebody like that, who will push and push and push until you're exhausted and tired and bleeding, consider who taught you to do that, who you witnessed doing that, and do you like doing that? Is it working for you, or are you tired and getting anxious and depressed? Are you missing, things at work because of it? Missing out on big ideas because you're so focused on the minute and you can't zoom out, It's okay to not become our parents, and it's okay to become our parents, but I think it's very important to understand why we do, or why we don't want to. So that's Part 1. There'll be plenty more daddy and mommy poems and stories. That was more of a story than a poem. But there'll be plenty more to come, so I hope everybody has a lovely day, wonderful night, afternoon, good evening, good night, something like that. So thank you so much for listening. Check out the description below and then leave a comment and a like. Thank you, baby. Bye.